The wedding dress hung perfectly white against the morning sun, but the bride was screaming. I stood in the doorway of the bridal suite, my badge still clipped to my belt from the night shift, watching Olivia collapse into her bridesmaid's arms. Her makeup ran in black rivers down her cheeks. She promised. Olivia kept saying. She promised she'd be here. The venue coordinator wrung her hand beside me, whispering that they'd found Diane's car in the parking lot, keys still in the ignition, her phone on the passenger seat. The ceremony was supposed to start in 2 hours. Diane Hartley, mother of the bride, had vanished somewhere between the rehearsal dinner and dawn. I watched the photographer awkwardly lower his camera. The floor stood frozen with a bouquet meant for the mother-daughter photos. Everything was ready. Everything except the person who mattered most. Olivia's father stood at the window, staring out at the lake behind the venue, his hands shaking. She wouldn't just leave, he said quietly. Not today. Not ever. I pulled out my phone and made the call I knew would ruin this day forever. The lake stretched out behind Riverside Manor like a dark mirror, perfectly still in the early morning light. I walked down to the parking lot where Diane's silver Honda sat alone near the water's edge. The driver's door hung open, just slightly, as if she'd stepped out for only a moment. Inside, her purse sat untouched on the passenger seat, wallet intact, lipstick rolled onto the floor. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Olivia, all from after midnight. The last text she'd sent was at 11:47 the night before, to the wedding coordinator confirming morning setup times. I circled the car slowly, looking for anything out of place. Her heels were missing, the ones she'd worn to the rehearsal dinner, the gold strappy ones Olivia had helped her pick out. But her jacket lay folded neatly in the back seat. The venue sat on the edge of Lake Pearson, a man-made reservoir surrounded by pine forest. The water was deep, cold even in summer. Local kids told stories about cars that went in and never came back up. I looked at that open car door, then at the lake, and felt something cold settle in my chest. 6 months earlier, Diane had walked into my office to report a break-in. Nothing was stolen, she'd said, but things were moved. Her jewelry box opened, drawers left slightly ajar. I know how this sounds, she told me, embarrassed. But I live alone. I know when something's been touched. I'd filed the report, checked her locks, found no signs of forced entry. She'd recently divorced after 23 years of marriage. I'd seen it before, the paranoia that comes with being alone for the first time. I told her to get better locks, maybe a camera. She'd thanked me and left. Now I stood in that same parking lot, remembering the fear in her eyes that day, the way she'd looked over her shoulder as she walked to her car. I dismissed it as adjustment anxiety, the nervousness of a newly single woman learning to live without someone else in the house. I'd been wrong. The morning sun climbed higher, and inside the venue, Olivia's wedding was falling apart. Guests were arriving, asking questions. The groom stood helpless in his tuxedo, and somewhere, Diane Hartley had disappeared without her phone, without her purse, wearing evening heels and a cocktail dress. The dive team arrived at noon. We'd called off the wedding, sent the guests home, turned the celebration into a crime scene. Olivia sat in the bridal suite, still wearing her wedding dress, refusing to take it off. "If I take it off," she whispered, "it means she's really gone." Her father, Thomas, gave his statement in the parking lot. They'd separated 2 years ago, divorced 6 months later. Amicable, he said. No fights, no drama. They'd both moved on. He had a new girlfriend, Karen, who stood beside him now, uncomfortable in her guest dress. "Diane seemed happy last night," Thomas said. "Really happy. She kept saying how proud she was, how Olivia turned out better than either of us deserved." His voice cracked. She was looking forward to today, to walking Olivia down the aisle with me. We'd practiced it, all 3 of us, yesterday afternoon. Karen shifted her weight, looked away. Something in her expression made me pause, but Thomas was still talking. After dinner, Diane said she was going to her room to practice her speech. She'd written something for the reception. She was nervous about public speaking. "What time was that?" I asked. "Around 10:30. We all said goodnight in the lobby. The dive team's boat motor started on the lake. Everyone turned to watch. They found her shoes first. Both of them 20 feet from shore, resting on the muddy bottom in 12 feet of water. The gold straps were still buckled, as if they'd simply slipped off her feet. The diver surfaced, holding them up in a sealed evidence bag, water streaming from his wetsuit. Olivia screamed when she saw them through the window. Her bridesmaids pulled the curtains, but it was too late. She knew. We all knew. You don't find shoes in a lake unless the person wearing them went in too. The divers went back under. I stood on the dock, watching the bubbles rise, counting the minutes. The lake was murky from recent rain, visibility poor. They were searching in a grid pattern, moving slowly through the darkness below. Thomas paced ashore, his shoes sinking into the soft mud. Karen tried to comfort him, but he shrugged her off. "This doesn't make sense," he kept saying. "Diane wouldn't do this. She wouldn't hurt Olivia like this." I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen enough to know that people don't vanish without reason, and they don't leave their shoes at the bottom of a lake by accident. The question was whether she'd walked in herself or if someone had helped her. By evening, they dragged the entire search area. No body, just the shoes sitting in an evidence bag on my desk back at the station. I logged them, photographed them, try not to think about how Olivia had smiled when she'd shown me the picture of them on her phone weeks ago, asking if they were too much for a mother of the bride. The forensic team processed Diane's car. No blood, no signs of struggle, just her belongings waiting for her to come back. Her suitcase was still in her hotel room upstairs, her toiletries lined up in the bathroom. The speech she'd written for the reception sat on the nightstand, handwritten on hotel stationery in her neat script. I read it 3 times. It was beautiful, full of love and hope and pride. "My darling Olivia," it began, "watching you grow into the woman you are today has been the greatest joy of my life." It ended with advice about marriage, about staying strong through hard times. "Remember," she'd written, "love isn't just about the good days. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard." Strange words from someone about to disappear. Or maybe the perfect goodbye from someone who knew what was coming. The hotel security footage showed Diane leaving the rehearsal dinner at 10:32, just as Thomas had said. She walked to the elevator alone, pressed the button for the 3rd floor where her room was. The elevator doors closed. 4 minutes later, the camera in the 3rd floor hallway showed her stepping out, walking toward her room. She stopped at her door, key card in hand. Then she turned, looked back toward the elevator, and hesitated. The timestamp read 10:37. For 8 seconds, she stood completely still, as if listening to something. Then she walked back to the elevator and pressed the down button. At 10:41, the lobby camera caught her exiting the elevator. She walked straight through the lobby, out the front doors, toward the parking lot. She was still wearing her cocktail dress and those gold heels. She didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't hesitate. The parking lot camera showed her reaching her car at 10:43. She opened the driver's door, sat down, but didn't start the engine. For 6 minutes, she just sat there in the dark, staring ahead. Then, at 10:49, she got out of the car and walked toward the lake. The camera lost her in the shadows beyond the parking lot lights. That was the last time anyone saw Diane Hartley alive. I interviewed the hotel staff through the night. The front desk clerk remembered Diane from check-in, said she seemed excited about the wedding. The bartender from the rehearsal dinner said she'd had 2 glasses of wine, nothing unusual. The housekeeping supervisor said Diane had left a generous tip and a thank you note in her room that morning. No one saw her go to the lake. No one heard anything strange. The venue had been empty after the rehearsal dinner. Everyone retired to their rooms. The night security guard had been making his rounds on the other side of the property. But one of the catering staff, a young woman named Maria, pulled me aside as I was leaving. "I saw something," she said quietly, glancing around. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now. She'd been loading equipment into the van around 10:30 when she noticed a car idling in the far corner of the parking lot, away from the lights. Not Diane's car. A dark sedan, maybe black or navy blue. No headlights on, just sitting there. "I thought maybe it was someone on a phone call," Maria said, "or a couple having a fight. I didn't pay much attention, but when I came back out 15 minutes later, it was gone." "Did you see who was inside?" She shook her head. "Too dark. I'm sorry. Olivia refused to leave the venue. Her bridesmaids had convinced her to change out of the wedding dress, but she sat in the bridal suite wearing sweatpants and her mother's jacket, the one from the back seat of the car. She'd wrapped herself in it like armor. "Tell me the truth," she said when I came to update her. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse. "Is she dead?" I wanted to lie, to give her hope, but I'd learned long ago that false hope is crueler than hard truth. "I don't know," I said, "but we're doing everything we can to find her. My dad said she seemed happy last night. Everyone keeps saying that. Like it matters." Olivia's hands twisted the jacket fabric, but I knew something was wrong. I've known for months. I sat down across from her. "What do you mean?" She was scared. She wouldn't say why, but I could tell. She started locking every door, checking windows twice. She bought a security system for her house. She told me she was just being careful, living alone and all, but it was more than that. Olivia looked up at me. I should have pushed harder. I should have made her tell me. Did she mention anyone bothering her? Following her? No, but about a month ago, she asked me about her wedding ring. The one from Dad. She'd kept it after the divorce, said it still meant something even if the marriage didn't. But then she asked if I wanted it, like she was getting her affairs in order. Olivia's voice broke. I told her she was being morbid. I told her to stop acting like something bad was going to happen. Outside, the dive team was packing up for the night. The lake kept its secrets. I drove to Diane's house at midnight. It sat on a quiet street in the suburbs, a modest two-story with a neat lawn and flower boxes in the windows. The security system Olivia mentioned was obvious. Cameras on the front door, motion sensors, new deadbolts. I used the key Olivia had given me and stepped inside. The alarm beeped, waiting for code. I entered the one Olivia provided, and the house fell silent. Everything was exactly as Diane had left it. Coffee mug in the sink, reading glasses on the kitchen counter, a library book bookmarked, and waiting on the sofa. The house felt like she'd just stepped out and would be back any moment. But upstairs, in her bedroom, something was wrong. The closet door stood open, clothes pushed aside as if she'd been searching for something specific. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, lit up, contents scattered. Not ransacked, just disturbed, like she'd been looking for something in a hurry. On her nightstand, I found her laptop. I opened it, and the screen lit up without asking for a password. Her email was open to the sent folder. The last email she'd sent was dated 2 days before the wedding, addressed to someone named Andrew. The subject line read, "We need to talk about what you did. Andrew Keller." I ran the name through our system at 3 in the morning, fueled by bad coffee and a growing sense of unease. He came back clean, no criminal record, but his name appeared in our files from 8 years ago. A witness statement in an assault case. The victim's name made my blood run cold. Diane Hartley. I pulled the old file. 8 years ago, Diane had pressed charges against a co-worker for unwanted advances and harassment. The co-worker's name was listed as Andrew Keller. He'd worked with her in an insurance office downtown. The charges were eventually dropped after he resigned and left town. The case was marked closed. 8 years was a long time. Long enough for people to forget. Long enough for someone to think they'd gotten away with something. I pulled Andrew's current information. He moved back to the area 6 months ago. Same time Diane reported her break-in. Same time she started acting afraid. The morning sun was rising when I finally left the station. I drove to the address listed for Andrew Keller, an apartment complex on the west side of town. His car was parked outside, a dark blue sedan, the same color Maria, the caterer, had described. Andrew Keller answered his door in a bathrobe, squinting against the morning light. He was in his 50s, average height, graying hair. He looked confused when I showed my badge, but not surprised. "I wondered when you'd come," he said, stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was neat, impersonal. Furniture that came with a rental, no photos on the walls, no personal touches. Like he hadn't really settled in, but didn't plan to stay long. "You know why I'm here?" I said. He nodded slowly, sinking into a chair. "Diane, I heard about the wedding. Is she really gone?" "You tell me. I didn't hurt her." His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "I know how it looks. I know what I did before. But I swear I didn't hurt her." "Then why did she email you 2 days ago, asking to talk about what you did?" Andrew's face crumpled. "Because I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but not what you think. He stood up, walked to a desk, and pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all of Diane, walking to her car, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, leaving work. Taken from a distance, through windows, across parking lots. I followed her, he said quietly. After I moved back, I saw her at the store one day. All those old feelings came back. I told myself I just wanted to apologize, to make things right. But I couldn't stop watching her. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was scaring her. But I couldn't stop. I arrested Andrew Keller on the spot. Stalking, harassment, violation of a previous restraining order that I found buried in the old case file. He didn't resist. He came quietly, still in his bathrobe, looking almost relieved. At the station, we processed him and put him in an interview room. I let him sit there for an hour while I went through his apartment with a team. We found more photos, a journal where he documented Diane's routines, notes about her schedule. It was obsessive, detailed, disturbing. But we didn't find anything linking him to her disappearance. No mud from the lake, no torn fabric, no signs he'd been anywhere near the venue. His phone records showed he'd been at home the night of the rehearsal dinner. His car had been parked at his apartment complex, confirmed by building security cameras. When I finally sat down across from him, Andrew was crying. I loved her, he said. In my own sick way, I thought I loved her. But I didn't hurt her. I swear on everything, I didn't hurt her. Then what happened? What did she mean in that email? She found out I was back in town. She saw me one day, sitting in my car outside her work. She came over, confronted me, told me if I didn't leave her alone, she'd go to the police. He wiped his eyes. I promised her I'd stop. I promised I'd leave town again. That email was her checking to make sure I'd kept my promise. And did you? I was supposed to leave the day after the wedding. I had a job lined up in Colorado, apartment rented, everything. I was finally going to do the right thing. He looked up at me, but I didn't kill her. I didn't take her. I just watched her from far away, like the coward I am. The problem was I believed him. Everything in Andrew's apartment, his records, his timeline, supported his story. He was a stalker, a creep, someone who'd made Diane's life hell. But he wasn't at the lake that night. He hadn't taken her, which meant someone else had. I drove back to the venue, to the lake that had swallowed Diane's shoes, but not her body. The dive team had promised to try again with better equipment to search deeper. But Lake Pearson was almost 100 feet deep in places, with underwater caves and shifting currents. If a body went deep enough, it might never surface. Thomas was there again, sitting on the dock, staring at the water. Karen had gone home, but he'd stayed. I keep thinking she'll come back, he said when I sat beside him. That this is all some terrible mistake. Tell me about the divorce, I said. You said it was amicable. It was. No fighting, no lawyers screaming at each other. We just grew apart. It happens. He picked up a stone, tossed it into the lake. I met Karen a year before we separated. I never cheated, never lied. But Diane knew. She could tell my heart wasn't in it anymore. She's the one who suggested the divorce. How did that make you feel? Relieved, honestly. Guilty for feeling relieved, but relieved. He looked at me. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want this to end badly. And for a while, it seemed like we'd done it right. We stayed friends. We put Olivia first. But something changed. Thomas was quiet for a long time. About 6 months ago, Diane told me she knew about Karen. That she'd known the whole time, even before the divorce. She said she'd seen the way I looked at her at some work party, and she just knew. Was she angry? No. That's what made it worse. She said she understood. That she felt the same way about someone once. And she knew what it was like to want something you couldn't have. He turned to me, his eyes red. She said she'd let me go because she loved me enough to want me to be happy, even if it meant she'd be alone. Diane's phone records revealed something I hadn't noticed before. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, she'd made dozens of calls to the same number. Most lasted only a few minutes. The number belonged to a Dr. Patricia Walsh, a therapist who specialized in trauma and anxiety. I called Dr. Walsh that afternoon. She was hesitant at first, citing patient confidentiality, but when I explained that Diane was missing and possibly dead, she agreed to talk. Diane came to see me about 4 months ago, Dr. Walsh said over the phone. She was struggling with anxiety, intrusive thoughts, fear. She said she felt like she was being watched, but she couldn't prove it. Did she mention Andrew Keller? Not by name, but she talked about a past trauma, someone who'd harassed her years ago. She was terrified he'd come back. Dr. Walsh paused, but that wasn't what worried me most. What do you mean? Diane was struggling with something deeper. Guilt, I think. She kept saying she'd made a terrible choice, something she couldn't take back. She wouldn't tell me what it was, said it was too shameful. But whatever it was eating her alive. I thanked Dr. Walsh and hung up. Diane's guilt, her fear, the way she'd looked over her shoulder for months. The email to Andrew asking about what he'd done. The cryptic comment to Thomas about understanding what it was like to want something you couldn't have. Pieces of a puzzle, but I couldn't see the picture yet. I went back to Diane's email, scrolling through months of correspondence. Work emails, wedding planning, messages to Olivia. And then, buried in a folder marked archive, I found them. Emails to someone named M, short messages, always late at night. I can't stop thinking about you. This has to end. We can't keep doing this. The last email was sent 3 weeks before the wedding. I told Thomas everything. He deserves to know the truth. I can't live with this secret anymore. I ran the email address through every database I had access to. Nothing. It was a private account, no name attached. But the writing style was familiar. Formal, careful, like someone used to choosing their words precisely. I called Thomas. Did Diane tell you something 3 weeks ago? Something about her past. He was silent for so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then, she told me she'd had an affair. During our marriage. It lasted about 6 months, ended before we separated. She said she needed me to know before the wedding, that she couldn't stand up with me and pretend she'd been faithful. How did you react? I was angry, hurt, but also relieved in a way. It made the divorce feel more fair, like we'd both moved on. His voice dropped, but then she said something strange. She said the affair had been a mistake, but the person wouldn't let it go. That they kept contacting her, wanting more. She was scared of what they might do. Did she tell you who it was? No. She said it would only make things worse. That they had as much to lose as she did. The wedding venue had security footage I hadn't reviewed yet. Not from a night Diane disappeared, but from the weeks before, during planning meetings and setup. I spent hours watching Diane meet with the coordinator, the florist, the caterer. In every frame, she looked tired, anxious, glancing over her shoulder. Then, in footage from 2 weeks before the wedding, I saw it. Diane standing in the parking lot, talking to someone beside a dark sedan. The angle was wrong to see their face, but their body language was tense. Diane's arms were crossed, her head shaking. The other person reached out to touch her arm. She stepped back. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. Then Diane walked away, and the other person got in their car and drove off. I froze the frame, zoomed in on the license plate. It took 10 minutes to run the registration. When the name came back, I had to read it twice to believe it. The car belonged to Karen Mitchell, Thomas's girlfriend. Karen was at Thomas's house when I arrived. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her face carefully neutral. Detective, she said, is there news about Diane? We need to talk. Alone. She glanced back at the house, where Thomas was presumably inside, then stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. What's this about? You knew Diane, before the divorce. It wasn't a question. Karen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. We met a few times. Work events. Holiday parties. We weren't close. That's not what your car's GPS says. You were at her house 6 times in the 2 months before Thomas filed for divorce. Karen's face went pale. I can explain. Then start talking. She sat down on the porch steps, her hands shaking. It wasn't supposed to happen. I worked with Thomas. We were friends, just friends. But then Diane called me one night, asked to meet for coffee. She said she knew Thomas had feelings for me. She wanted to know if I felt the same. And did you? Yes. But I told her I'd never act on it while they were married. I swore to her. Karen's voice broke. But Diane said something I'll never forget. She said marriage vows were just words. That people broke promises all the time. That if I really loved Thomas, I should take what I wanted. So you did? No, not then. But she kept calling me, inviting me over. We'd have wine and talk about Thomas, about their marriage. She told me they were already dead inside. that she wanted out but didn't know how to leave without looking like the bad guy. Karen looked up at me. She practically pushed us together, like she needed permission to give up. "So you and Diane were friends?" I said, trying to understand. "She encouraged your relationship with Thomas. Then what changed?" Karen stood up, paced the porch. "About 6 months ago, everything shifted. She stopped calling me. When we saw each other at Olivia's engagement party, she could barely look at me. I asked Thomas what was wrong, but he said she was just stressed about the wedding. But it was more than that. I think she regretted it. Regretted pushing us together. Regretted the divorce. I think she realized too late that she still loved Thomas." Karen's eyes filled with tears. 2 weeks before the wedding, she called me, asked to meet at the venue. When I got there, she was furious. She said I'd ruined her life, that I'd taken everything from her, that she'd made a mistake letting me get close to Thomas. "What did you say?" I told her it was too late, that Thomas loved me now, that she couldn't change her mind just because she was lonely. Karen wiped her eyes. She said I had no idea what I'd done, that there were things about their marriage I didn't understand. Then she got her car and left. That was the last time you saw her, until the rehearsal dinner. She acted normal that night, pleasant even. But when she looked at me, I could see the hatred. She was good at hiding it from everyone else, but I could tell. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. I was relieved when she left early. I didn't want to deal with her drama anymore. I brought Karen in for formal questioning. Her story never changed, and her alibi for the night Diane disappeared checked out. She'd been with Thomas in their hotel room from 11 o'clock onward. The hotel key card records confirmed it, but something Karen said kept nagging at me. There were things about their marriage I didn't understand. What had Diane meant? What secret was she protecting, even in her anger? I went back to Diane's emails, searching for anything I'd missed. Then I found it, buried in her drafts folder. An unsent email to Olivia, dated the day before the wedding. "My darling girl," it began. "If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. There are things I need you to know, things I should have told you long ago. The truth about your father and me. The truth about why we really divorced. The truth about the choice I made that I'll regret for the rest of my life." The email ended abruptly, unfinished, like Diane had started to confess something, then couldn't bring herself to complete it. I called Olivia. "Did your mother ever talk to you about why she and your father divorced? Just that they grew apart. That's all anyone ever says, right?" Olivia sounded exhausted. "Why? I need you to think carefully. In the months before the divorce, did you notice anything unusual? Arguments? Your mother acting differently? Long silence. Then, there was one thing. I came home early from college one weekend, about a year before they separated. I heard them fighting in their bedroom. Dad was saying something about making a choice, and Mom was crying. When I knocked on the door, they stopped talking. Mom came out and said everything was fine. Did you hear what the choice was about?" "No." But later that night, I found Mom sitting in the dark in the living room. She looked at me and said, "Sometimes the right choice feels like the worst one." I asked what she meant, but she just hugged me and told me to go to bed. The second search of the lake began at dawn. This time, they brought in specialized equipment, sonar imaging, and diverse terrain for deep water recovery. The news had gotten out, and reporters lined the shore, cameras ready. I stood on the dock with Olivia and Thomas, watching the boats move across the water in systematic patterns. The morning was cold, mist rising off the lake like ghosts. At 9:15, the sonar picked up something, a shape on the bottom, in 70 feet of water, near an underwater shelf that dropped off into darkness. The divers went down, their lights disappearing into the murk. 20 minutes later, they surfaced, and they weren't alone. They'd found Diane. Her body had been weighted down with stones, wrapped in a tarp, hidden in a place where she might never have been found if we hadn't been specifically looking. The coroner estimated she'd been dead before she went into the water. Cause of death? Asphyxiation. Olivia collapsed when they brought her mother to the surface. Thomas caught her, held her, both of them crying. I turned away, giving them privacy in their grief. But my mind was racing, weighted down, hidden deliberately. This wasn't suicide. This wasn't an accident. Someone had killed Diane Hartley and tried to make her disappear forever. The autopsy results came back within hours. Diane had been strangled, manually by someone with large hands. There were defense wounds on her arms, skin cells under her fingernails. She fought back. The time of death was estimated between 10:45 and 11:15 the night before the wedding. The stones used to weight her body came from the landscaping around the venue. Someone had gathered them in the dark, wrapped her body, carried her to the water, and let her sink into the depths. Someone strong, someone who knew the venue's layout, someone who had access to the property that night. I pulled the security footage again, this time focusing on the parking lot between 10:45 and midnight. Most of the cameras were pointed at the building or the front entrance. But one camera, mounted on a light post, caught the edge of the lake. At 11:03, a figure appeared in the frame, walking backward into view, dragging something heavy. The footage was grainy, dark, but the shape was unmistakable. A body wrapped in something dark, being pulled toward the water. The figure paused at the water's edge, looked around, then continued. 3 minutes later, they returned empty-handed, walking quickly toward the parking lot. I enhanced the image as much as I could. The person was wearing dark clothing, a hood pulled up, but in one frame, when they turned to look back at the lake, the light caught their face for just a second. It was enough. I arrested Thomas Hartley at 6 o'clock that evening. He was still at his house, sitting in the dark, when I walked in with 2 officers. He didn't seem surprised. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since I saw the footage. Since I put together what Diane was trying to tell everyone." I sat across from him. "She was pregnant, wasn't she?" Thomas's face crumpled. "She told me the night of the rehearsal dinner. After everyone left, she asked me to meet her by the lake. Said she had something important to tell me. And she told you she was pregnant with your child. She said it happened the weekend before we signed the divorce papers. One last time, for old time's sake. We were both drunk, emotional. I didn't think anything of it. But then she found out she was pregnant." His hands shook. She'd been hiding it for weeks. Wasn't sure what to do. She said she couldn't have a baby at her age, not alone. But she couldn't bring herself to end the pregnancy either. So she was going to tell Olivia, tell everyone. She said she decided to keep it, that she'd raised the baby alone. But she wanted me to know, wanted to give me the choice to be involved or walk away. Thomas looked up at me, his eyes hollow. I panicked. All I could think about was Karen, about our life together, about starting over. A baby with Diane would ruin everything. Thomas confessed to everything. How he'd asked Diane to meet him by the lake to talk it through. How the conversation had escalated into an argument. How she told him she didn't need him, didn't want him, that she was done letting him control her choices. She said I'd taken enough from her. Thomas said, his voice breaking, that I'd used up the best years of her life, and now I was trying to steal her future too. She turned to walk away, and I couldn't let her tell everyone. Couldn't let Karen find out. Couldn't face being tied to Diane forever. So he grabbed her from behind, held her until she stopped fighting. Panicked when he realized what he'd done. Wrapped her body in a tarp from the venue's storage shed. Weighted her down with stones. Pushed her into the lake and watched her sink. Then he'd gone back to his hotel room, where Karen was waiting. Showered, changed his clothes, climbed into bed beside her. Woke up the next morning and pretended his ex-wife had simply vanished. I thought they'd never find her, he said. The lake is so deep. I thought she'd just be gone, and everyone would eventually move on. What about Olivia? I asked. What about your daughter, whose wedding you destroyed? Thomas closed his eyes. I told myself I was protecting her, that finding out about the baby would hurt her more than losing her mother. But the truth is, I was only thinking about myself. I always have been. Thomas Hartley pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. Karen left town the day after his conviction, unable to face what she'd unknowingly been part of. Andrew Keller completed his sentence for stalking and left the state, finally keeping the promise he should have kept years ago. Olivia held a memorial service for her mother at the lake. She planted a tree on the shore, a willow that would grow and bend toward the water, remembering. She scattered her mother's ashes there, along with the wedding bouquet that never got carried down the aisle. I stood at the back during the service, watching Olivia say goodbye to both her parents. One dead, one locked away forever. A family destroyed by secrets and selfishness and the inability to tell the truth when it mattered most. Diane Hartley had spent her final months afraid of the wrong person. She'd been looking over her shoulder for Andrew Keller while the real danger stood right beside her, holding her hand, pretending to share custody and wedding planning in the future. The porch light at the venue still flickers sometimes, I'm told. The new owners try to fix it, but it keeps going back to that uncertain rhythm, on and off, like a heartbeat that can't quite settle. Some of the staff say they see a woman in a cocktail dress walking by the lake at night, but I think that's just stories. Just people trying to make sense of senseless loss. But I know the truth. Diane Hartley doesn't haunt that lake. She's at peace now, freed from the fear and guilt and impossible choices that haunted her living days. The real ghost is in a prison cell, living every day with the knowledge of what he stole. Not just a life, but a future. Not just a mother, but a grandmother who'll never be. Olivia calls me sometimes, late at night, when the grief gets too heavy. We talk about her mother, about the investigation, about how she's learning to live with loss. She's stronger than she knows, that girl. Stronger than either of her parents ever were. And that, I suppose, is the only justice left to find. Thank you for watching True Crime Files Gist. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the secrets we keep and the prices we pay for them, please hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a case that matters. Share this story with someone who needs to understand that justice isn't just about solving crimes. It's about honoring the victims who can no longer speak for themselves. Every share brings Diane's story to someone who needs to hear it. Every subscriber helps us continue investigating the cases that demand to be told. Every like reminds us why we do this work. We'll see you in the next investigation. Until then, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, the truth always surfaces eventually.